Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this May 12th, 2015 day on our calendar, this Tuesday. I'm your host, Greg Anthony. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com, and you can catch my show every Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Okay, I promised to do a show about Isis. Isis, in Greek mythology, Isis, the terror group, and to connect the dots between that and the creator of this terrorist group, ISIS, who I believe the facts, the symbols and signs show it is Washington, D.C., Rome, and London, the key players. And I've shown you in the past how this triumvirate of evil has created terrorism, has created chaos, created evil organizations so they can protect you, the innocent. So my intention is to show you, through signs and symbols, how first, what the obelisk really is, where these obelisks are stationed, how ISIS is a key player today on the stage of terrorism, and how all this stuff comes together. So let's see if we can do this. I'm not sure I can do it in one show, but I'm going to do it in 2 or 3. Maybe we can get it done in 1. I'm not sure. But let's go back to the obelisk first, the sign and symbol, the key to the opening up of this triumvirate of evil. Now, where are the main obelisks today? They're in Rome, they're in Washington, D.C., and London, although there are many other ones. You can find one at the Luxor, I believe, in Las Vegas, a symbol of the obelisk, but there's many, many all around the world. And we'll talk about the original ones and the ones constructed that aren't original so we move on here. But the earliest obelisks were known as Ben stones. They were rough-hewn and truncated, but they were tipped off by the pyramid shape, which designates obelisks from other monumental columns. The spirit of the sun god was supposed to enter into these obelisks. Yes, well, at certain periods, and on these occasions, human sacrifices were offered to it. The victims were probably prisoners of war who had been captured alive and foreigners. And when these failed, the priests must have drawn upon the native population. Now, may I add, I believe these sacrifices, human sacrifices, still go on. And we'll look at the phallic heritage of these obelisks. Okay, the king and kings erected Ben-Bens in Ra's honor so that by 1300 BC the city was full of them. The Roman author Pliny wrote about this city of On, where kings entered into a kind of rivalry in the forming elongated blocks of stone known as obelisks and consecrated them to the divinity of the sun. In our phallic heritage, we are told that all pillars or columns originally had a phallic significance and were therefore considered sacred. Are they still sacred today in the 3 places I mentioned? I believe so. Pan, the goat god and god of sensuality, was often represented as an obelisk. A former witch writes, "The obelisk is a long, pointed, four-sided shaft, the uppermost portion of which forms a pyramid." The word obelisk literally means Baal's shaft, or Baal's organ, or Osiris's organ of reproduction. To understand just why the obelisk is so important to the people that display them today, ones in, at the Vatican and Washington and in London, one has to understand the Masonic version of Egyptian mythology behind all these rituals, which I might add the Vatican is a part of. Osiris was a king of Egypt who married his sister Isis. ISIS, now remember that word. Isn't there a terrorist group out there named ISIS? Why would they use that? Well, here's why. Because they believe in this mythology. They believe in its power. Now, Isis married her brother Set. Then they wished to usurp the throne, so plotted the death of Set. But he tricked Isis into climbing into a golden chest, As soon as he was inside, Set nailed down Osiris into this golden chest. Set nailed down the lid and flung the chest into the Nile. It was carried off to Syria, where it came to rest against a small tamarisk tree, or an acacia tree, with the dead Osiris inside of it. Isis found out what Set had done to Osiris, so she set out to find her husband. Now, folks, it's important to remember, people believe this today. And the one who believes it, I believe, is going to be here in September, Pope Francis, who'll tell you he's a Christian and he's worshiping God, where I believe the symbol outside of the Vatican, in that St. Peter's Square, one that I walk by every day almost for 7 years when I worked there, in Rome, not in the Vatican, thank God. But anyway, they worship this form of God, not the God that you and I believe in. A vision led her to this tree, where she recovered his body and took it back to Egypt. Alas, Set stole it again and tore it into 14 pieces. Boy, these guys were pretty interesting, huh? Which he scattered throughout Egypt to prevent Osiris coming to life again. Can you imagine, folks, the bedtime stories you tell your children? Do you think these guys tell these bedtime stories to their kids? Can you see George Daddy Bush talking to little Georgie at his bedside, saying these things? Alas, Set stole it, tore his body into 14 pieces, which he scattered throughout Egypt to prevent Osiris coming to life. Isis, then. Isis. Not the terrorist group, but the Greek goddess. But they're one and the same, really, in the names. Recovered all but one of the pieces, little Georgie, the penis, and gave Osiris a fit burial. Now, I imagine Mrs. Obama told this to little Obama. He said, their son Horus avenged him by slaying Set. Now, having triumphed, another son, Anubis, resurrected Osiris with a lion's grip. Having triumphed over the grave, Osiris now reigns as king and judge of the so-called dead. The piece of Osiris that Isis never recovered was the penis, little Mr. Obama. What's his first name? I always heard President Obama. I can't even remember. Good. Anyway, Set had thrown the penis into the Nile, where it was eaten by fish or alligators, they say. Ever resourceful, Isis manufactured an artificial organ, which was an obelisk back then, which the Egyptians established as a culture festival around this organ symbol, penis symbol. From this, it is, small step to conclude that the benben, or the obelisk, was itself a phallic symbol, which it is. Whether Osiris, Re, or fertility in general, it was a symbol of fatherhood, the rock of everything they stand for in sun worshipping. To Freemasons and the Vatican groping for mystic enlightenment in the 1800s, the obelisk was the only architectural symbol of Osiris still in existence. And it's existing right here today. And if some Masonic historians claim, like Hiram Abiff is really Osiris reborn, there could be no greater proof of Masonic and Vatican ascendancy, because they are all together, the Freemasons and the Vatican. In the modern world, an Egyptian obelisks thrust by Masons into the heart of the West's great cities. These would also symbolize Boaz and Joachim, the twin pillars. Wow. Twin towers coming down? Interesting. Which Masons claim were built in front of Solomon's temple, in imitation of two obelisks at the entrance of the Egyptian temples. Okay, so there is a little bit of historical information regarding the obelisks. Now, my question to you is, I said I would make a connection. The trinity of global evil names worship Isis through the obelisks that you see at Washington, in Rome, and in London. Now, it's easy to figure out. You know, since 9/11 went down, the twin temples, and we go into Iraq with Al-Qaeda, a terrorist organization created by them. Now they have the big one, and they are very sign and symbol oriented. So they pick the name ISIS. They're telling each other, now we got these guys by the you-know-what. That's how I know they've created this organization, and how they have created chaos, and they've created terrorism and wars throughout the centuries. And they all work together. Now, let's look a little closer at this trinity of evil that exists today. There are 3 cities that you got to look at across the planet that share striking similarities and play a critical role in the global governmental system we have. The 3 city-states, along with the role they serve, is as follows. City of London, known for its finance. Washington, D.C., known for its military. That's what we're good at in America, bombing people. We're the Roman Empire, the military, Rome's legions today. And Vatican City, having to do with the spiritual or religion. Put all those together and they got you, don't they? And their symbols tell you that. The aforementioned city-states listed above are all sovereign. Did you know that? They don't have anything to do with the United States or London, the City of London or England, or the Vatican has nothing to do with Italy. They're all sovereign within another country. Now, in other words, the City of London, that is a square mile within Greater London, is not technically part of Greater London or England. Just as Vatican City is not a part of Rome or Italy, it's the size of a football field. And likewise, Washington, D.C., did you know your own capital is not a part of the United States that it controls, which makes us foreigners, right? Foreign terrorists. These sovereign corporate entities have their own laws and their own identities. They also have their own flag. Seen below, I can show you that the flag of Washington, D.C., note the 3 stars, representing the trinity of these 3 cities, also known as the Empire of the Cities. There is also a high esoteric significance of the number 3. Washington, D.C. was established as a city-state in 1871 with the Passage Act of 1871, which officially established the United States as a corporation under the rule of Washington, which itself is subservient to the City of London. Corporations are run by presidents, which is why we call the person perceived to hold the highest seat of power in the land the president. The fact is, the president is nothing more than a figurehead for the central bankers and a transnational corporation, both of which themselves are controlled by high ecclesiastic Vatican Freemasonry that really control this country and they ultimately control all the shots going on in the world. Washington, D.C. operates under a system of Roman law, remember that, and outside of the limitations established by the Constitution. Therefore, it should not be a surprise that the name Capitol Hill derives from the Capitoline Hill, which was the seat of government for the Roman Empire. If you look at the wall behind the podium in the House of Representatives, you will notice that on either side of the U.S. flag is a depiction of bundles of sticks tied together with an axe. These are called fasci, hence the root word of fascism. This was the symbol of fascism in the Roman Empire, and is the symbol that you live under. It was under the Nazis and still is today. It is not a coincidence that these symbols are featured in the Hall of Congress. Can you believe this? Yes, I can, and I tell you we're a fascist country. We've always been. Any American who thinks they are living in a free country does not have a clue. And the fact is that the United States Corporation is controlled from the City of London by the Crown. We fought that Revolutionary War, which was instigated not by what you believe. It was instigated and thought up, and much of it was planned by Lorenzo Ricci, a Jesuit general from Rome. Go back to some of my old shows to get that. The fact is, we're still controlled by London, which is not the British monarchy as we believe, but rather the private corporation that is in the inner city of London. Bankers, that's why we talk about the bankers. And then we're controlled by the spiritual in Rome. That square mile in London. This is the London I'm talking about, which is not a part of England. This square mile that makes up the center of Greater London has its own mayors, its own court, its own laws, its own flag, police force, and newspaper, just like the Vatican. It is the heart of the global financial system. Now, Vatican City, I'm looking at their Corporation of London, the insignia. It's amazing. It's got a Knights Templar shield, cross. Vatican City also has its own mayor called the Governatore. Laws, flags, postal service, newspaper, radio, and television station, and even its own prison. Another thing these three cities have in common are their own obelisks. The connection. Now remember, obelisk, ISIS. ISIS, terrorist group today. Obelisks are tall. We talked about it, four-sided shafts of stone which taper at the top in a pyramidal fashion. The obelisk is a phallic symbol. We talked about that. And represents the male penis. And if you look at all of them, they're inside of a circle. And the circle and the dot is an interesting Masonic ancient symbol of what? Man and the woman impregnating. Now, this is the symbolic of the Egyptian sun god Ra and Osiris and Isis. And it's the ancient symbol of male energy and generation. Vatican obelisk, you can see it right there. I'm looking at it right now because I walked by it many, many times without knowing what the heck it was. And saying, boy, isn't that thing weird to be here? Now, they'll tell you they do it for posterity's sake. It was a gift. But you don't do that in a Christian area. It is not. It is a representation of the temple to the sun god behind it, which is St. Peter's. Now, the circle at the base of this obelisk that I walk through represents a female vagina and thus male-female duality. Also notice the lines extending from the circle forming a Union Jack. That's what you see there in the Vatican, as seen on the British flag. The Union Jack, they'll tell you, is the Scotland and England mixing together or something. No. There's the Union Jack right there. The London obelisk, a.k.a. Cleopatra's Needle. Where's that located? I didn't get to the... it's located on the banks of the River Thames. Let me see how much time we got here. I got about 6 minutes. This obelisk was transported to London and erected in 1878 under the reign of Queen Victoria. The obelisk stood in the Egyptian city of On, or Heliopolis, city of sun. The Knights Templars' land extended to the area of the Thames, where Templars had their own docks. Either side of the obelisk is surrounded by a sphinx, also symbolism dating back to the ancient world. So that's who they worship. Then we come to our own Washington obelisk, a.k.a. the Washington Monument, standing at 555 feet tall. Why does Hollywood always use 555? Interesting. Washington Monument is the tallest obelisk in the world, or also the tallest standing structure in Washington, D.C. The monument's cornerstone, a 12-ton slab of marble, was donated by the Grand Lodge of Freemasons. Like the Vatican obelisk, the Washington Monument, too, is surrounded by a circle denoting the female, right? The reflecting pool in front of the monument signifies the ancient Masonic Kabbalistic dictum, as above, so goes below. So why are these three cities ultimately connected? How? Now I'm going to go to a gentleman by the name of, let's see here, Mr. Matthew D. Jarvie, who'll give us an insight into this, who's helping us along with all this information. Thank you, Daniel. So how are these cities ultimately collected, asks Daniel Darby. We must first go back to the Knights Templar and their initial 200-year reign of power. Yep, the Vatican's there, folks. The Knights Templar were first called the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. This is a blatantly misleading title considering the immense wealth and power of the Templars, who operated 9,000 manors across Europe and owned all of the mills and markets. It was the Templars that issued the first paper money for public use in Europe, establishing the fiat banking system. Yep, the Vatican was involved here. They know what they're doing. In England, the Templars established their headquarters at London Temple, which still exists today and is called the Temple Bar. A nice place, I guess, to go have a pint. This is located in the city of London, between Fleet Street and Victoria Embankment. The aforementioned crown, to be exact, is the Knights Templars Church, also known as Crown Temple. It is the Crown Temple that controls the legal court system of the U.S., Canada, and many other countries. All bar associations are directly linked to the International Bar Association and the Inns of Courts at the Crown Temple in the City of London, all having connection back to Rome. Oh, isn't this fun? Anytime you hear somebody refer to the Bar Association, this is interesting because I have a law degree. Imagine if I got in it. Oh, my God. Would they disbar me? They are talking about a British Masonic system that has nothing to do with a country's sovereignty or the constitutional rights of the people. This is why, when you go to court in the U.S., you see the flag, U.S. flag with a gold fringe, denoting international rule. The government of the United States, Canada, and Britain are all subsidiaries of the Crown, as is the Federal Reserve in the U.S. The ruling monarch in England is also subordinate to the Crown. And remember, subordinate to Rome as well. And remember when the Prime Minister, what was his name? I forget all these guys' names. When he left office, he became a Roman Catholic. You know who I'm talking about. But anyway, got a couple minutes and then we'll take a break and try to get through. We're still at the beginning stages of this. I've got a couple other people that are going to chime in and tell you about this. This is why when you go to court, you see the flag, like I said, with gold fringe. Now, the global financial and legal system is controlled from the City of London, and they are, you bet, beholden to Rome. The global financial and the square mile making up the center of London is the global seat of power, at least the visible level. And we're going to get back with this in just a minute. We got about a minute. And I want to mention that that's what we're dealing with here. That's why you see all this injustice going on in our court system, because it is not our court system. We are foreigners to it, might as well have a court of inquisition, as they do in Rome. And these courts that we have here are nothing more than secular courts of inquisition when it gets to important issues. Oh, you may get some justice if you got a DUI or some small case. But when it gets to important issues, there is no justice. Now, most Americans believe the U.S. declared independence from Britain when this is simply untrue, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. And can't you see how this is all connecting? And like I said, it's more than just a terrorist organization, ISIS. They've created, this is the temples that create it. They tell us through their signs and symbols, and we'll be back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, we're back on the Investigative Journal for the final 30 minutes, and I'm connecting the dots between Rome, London, and Washington, D.C., as well as the obelisks that tell us who they really are, that represent and are shown at each one of these places, how these are really not a part, in Washington, not a part of America, London, not a part, that part of London, that small area, not a part of London proper in England, and Rome, not a part of Italy, but they're all sovereign, and we've went through that. Then I'm showing you how ISIS and the obelisks, where they come from. Then I'm making the connection that through their signs and symbols, which is the key to telling us who they are, that the thing on your mind right now is ISIS, this terrorist organization, and why they named it ISIS. And this tells you who created ISIS. So the enemy is within. Now, you won't hear that anywhere on the media, in any of these places, because they're all bought and paid for. Now, let's go back to what we were talking about. Most Americans believe the U.S. declared independence from Britain, and this is simply not the case. Of the signatories to the Declaration of Independence, at least 5 of them were Temple Bar attorneys, and you know what the Temple Bar is all about. I explained that last half hour. All of whom had sworn allegiance to the Crown. Alexander Hamilton was one of the Middle Crown agents during the formation of the U.S. and was assigned to set up the American banking system on orders from the Crown. To control the United States, of course. In fact, a state is a legal entity of the Crown. Your state is a legal entity of the Crown. The Crown also beholden to Rome and the Vatican and the Pope. This is why we also have the State of Israel. It's the same thing. Beholden to the Pope. And that's why Israel, the Vatican, has a strong influence in Jerusalem. And that's why someday they're going to take it over. Furthermore, of the members of the Constitutional Convention that signed our completed U.S. Constitution, 7 were Knights Templars, who had also pledged allegiance to the Crown. Therefore, it's no coincidence that today, copies of both the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution hang on the wall in the library of the Middle Temple in London. To put it in all context, it is the Crown that controls the global financial system and runs the governments of all Commonwealth countries and many Commonwealth Western nations as well. The Crown, of course, traces back to the Vatican, which is headed by the Pope, Now, let me add that their expertise, the Jesuit and the Vatican's expertise in fomenting wars and infiltrating countries, is used by these groups, and it can be traced back in our country to the Revolutionary War. And so, as I tell you, this is who created ISIS. For a reason, to create chaos, to create terrorism, to, in a sense, have you think that they're protecting you, while at the same time they're going to destroy us and the country that we think we know, or that we're led to believe. So the crown traces back to the Vatican, headed by the Pope, and he's the real power behind the powers. And behind the curtain, some of which many more people are known, but many unknown, many of which are completely unknown to the public. So there we have a little bit of what really is going on behind the scenes. Now, let's get back to this obelisk in the Washington Monument. And this is a representation of who they worship in that Washington, D.C., which is not a part of the United States, but controls you. And let's just talk about sex within a circle here. And if you go there, there's a circle around the monument. And this circle is commonly used to depict the female sexual organ. Satanists love the use of the 8-step path of enlightenment. And that's the 8 steps you'll see in that circle. They believe a person needs to go through 8 separate steps to become fully enlightened spiritually. And you can get that spiritual enlightenment with a quick trip to Rome. Maybe get down into the catacombs and see what goes on down there. We talked about that yesterday. The final step, which is the 8th step, is the sex act. Notice that the very center of this symbol is a very small circle. This symbol is the ultimate female sexual representation. Probably the most famous of all obelisks in the world is the Washington Monument. Why would that be? It is believed, and we talked about that, the spirit of the Egyptian sun god Ra, Osiris erecting that or Isis erecting that after she lost her husband Osiris. And they pray to it. They supposedly do 3 times daily, if possible, and facing east. Interesting. The obelisk is the most recognized of all phallic symbols. The sex act between male and female is represented by an obelisk within a circle. The Washington Monument sits within a circle. Freemasonry planned and Vatican planned, designed and created the Washington Monument. The obelisk is greatly revered in Masonry, and the Vatican has a quick tour of any cemetery in New England will tell you. You can tell which graves are Masonic by the obelisks and their headstones. Right. Of course. Not all of them choose it. But anyway, that's just a little bit about what's going on with the obelisk. Now, have anybody else in America thought about this? Well, I found one guy who did, and he was asking some questions about it. Let's see what Mark Dice has to say about Washington Monument and the obelisk.
Mark Dice here in the belly of the beast, Washington, D.C., right outside the foot of the Washington Monument, where one would expect to see a statue of George Washington or some American symbol, but instead we have this bizarre and enormous Egyptian obelisk that has become the symbol of George Washington and America. And I have news for you that this Egyptian obelisk, this Washington Monument, is really dedicated to the Illuminati, to the secret establishment. This is a symbol of their power, of their dominance. This shows that they rule here. This is an enormous monument dedicated not to America, not to democracy, but to the secret establishment, to the Illuminati, the puppet masters, the true power in Washington, D.C. I'm going to talk to some tourists to see if they've ever thought of these things or to see if they think that I'm totally crazy. Hey guys.
Hey, how are you?
Here at the foot of the Washington Monument. Just a couple questions for you. Why is the Washington Monument an Egyptian obelisk when it's supposedly an American symbol?
We've taken a lot of their kind of architectural designs, haven't we, and a lot of the stuff that we've done around DC. I'm sure most of the inspirations for the stuff around here have come from ancient cultures. I know some of the other stuff has come from Greece. So,
but if it's American and it's called the George Washington Monument, shouldn't it be a statue? I was expecting a statue of George Washington, like the Lincoln Memorial is a statue of Lincoln. Isn't that weird? Do you think that's weird?
I think that is weird. I think that's pretty weird.
Yeah.
What would you think if I said that this was a symbol and a monument created by and dedicated to a secret society, a powerful secret society?
I would be very intrigued to hear more about it.
The Masons?
The Illuminated Masons, the Illuminati. Does that sound crazy to you? Does that sound plausible?
Definitely doesn't sound, I wouldn't say crazy. I think I could definitely be open to hearing something like that. Yeah.
Why is the Washington Monument an Egyptian obelisk, you think, instead of a big statue of George Washington? That's pretty weird, isn't it?
I don't believe that.
Why would they pick an Egyptian symbol and say that it represents George Washington and America?
That I do not know.
Never thought about that.
No.
What if I were to tell you that this was a symbol dedicated to a secret society of very powerful men?
Similar to the Masons?
Yes. Would that seem far-fetched to you?
Maybe not.
Pretty interesting. How powerful is this group when they can build a monument like this and call it American when it's Egyptian? Isn't that weird?
That is pretty weird.
Let me just ask another tourist. Let me clean off my lens first. Hey, I just got a question for you. You're sitting out here at the foot of the Washington Monument. Why is the Washington Monument, the big American icon, an Egyptian obelisk?
I would like to know the same thing. I don't know.
Do
you know?
I do know, and I'll
Okay,
tell you in a second.
Good.
I would expect maybe a statue of George Washington or some American symbol,
Yeah.
wouldn't you think?
Definitely.
What if I were to tell you that this monument was built and designed and dedicated to a powerful secret society that's in control of Washington, D.C. and the world? Does that seem far-fetched?
No, it does not.
Kind of makes sense that a group of powerful men would want to kind of bind together into a secret mafia to further their own interests at the expense of others, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly what it is, but I've definitely been interested in this topic and thinking about it a lot lately myself. I mean, I don't know if you've even very powerful people in the entertainment business, like Jay-Z, Rihanna.
These wannabe
Throw up
Illuminati.
the triangle all the time.
Signaling
symbols.
to their Illuminati
You play some of
masters.
their songs backwards. You'll hear things, and I think that's definitely interesting.
So it wouldn't be surprising
Yeah.
to you that there's a secret establishment.
And the dollar bill.
See, she knows. People are starting to know more and more
Yeah.
about this, that the Illuminati, the secret powerful network of super intelligent men, are the power base and have been for hundreds of years, thousands of years, really, throughout the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not. So you're saying I'm not crazy for
Yeah,
thinking.
no, you're not crazy.
Here we see a helicopter flying around the obelisk of Isis.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to my YouTube channel if you're new. Check out some of the previous videos and playlists on youtube.com/.
And that's Mark Dice. Give him a little plug. And if any of you people that were on that show or other people watching, come to my show, the Investigative Journal. And, we can show you exactly how all this works. It's not hard to figure out once you get all the information. And, what's interesting let's go back to the empires of the city and get some information regarding Washington, D.C., London, and the Vatican City. I think you'll find this interesting.
The flag of Washington's District of Columbia has 3 red stars, one for each city-state in the 3-city empire. This corporate empire of 3 city-states controls the world economically through London's inner city, militarily through the District of Columbia, and spiritually through the Vatican. The Constitution for the District of Columbia operates under a tyrannical Roman law known as Lex Fori, which bears no resemblance to the U.S. Constitution. When Congress passed the Act of 1871, it created a separate corporate government for the District of Columbia. This treasonous act allowed the District of Columbia to operate as a corporation outside the original Constitution of the United States and outside of the best interests of American citizens. A sobering study of the signed treaties and charters between Britain and the United States exposes a shocking truth. The United States has always been, and still is, a British Crown colony. King James I was famous not for just changing the Bible into the King James Version, but for signing the first Charter of Virginia in 1606. That charter granted America's British forefathers a license to settle and colonize America. The charter also guaranteed that future kings and queens of England would have sovereign authority over all the citizens and colonized land in America stolen from the Indians. After America declared its independence from Great Britain, the Treaty of 1783 was signed. That treaty specifically identifies the King of England as the Prince of the United States and contradicts the belief that America won the War of Independence. Although King George III of England gave up most of his claims over his American colonies, he kept his right to continue receiving payment for his business venture of colonizing America. If America had really won the War of Independence, they would never have agreed to pay debts and reparations to the King of England. When Congress passed the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the U.S. President was made subservient to the King of England. The 13th Amendment is called the Title of Nobility Amendment and forbids U.S. presidents and their officials from using royal titles like king or prince or baron. For some mysterious reason, the 13th Amendment, which was ratified in 1810, no longer appears on current copies of the Constitution. America's blood-soaked War of Independence against the British bankrupted America and turned its citizens into permanent debt slaves of the king. In the War of 1812, the British torched and burned to the ground the White House and all U.S. government buildings and destroyed ratification records of the U.S. Constitution. 1 century later, a corrupt U.S. Congress committed the biggest theft in world history. They passed Paul Warburg's Federal Reserve Act in 1913, handing over America's gold and silver reserves and total control of America's economy to the Rothschild banksters. Most Americans still believe that the Fed, or Federal Reserve, is the government. It is not. The Fed is a privately owned banking system whose majority Class A shareholders are the Rothschilds, Warburgs, Kuhn and Loeb, J.P. Morgan, Rockefeller, Israel Seif, and the Lehman Brothers. This private banking cartel is the Fed and is never audited and never pays taxes. They print and design America's money, which displays their symbols of an Egyptian pyramid, a Masonic all-seeing eye, and the words, "In God we trust." Who exactly is the God they trust? They also collect American taxpayers' money through the IRS. Then they loan it back again with interest to pay for roads, bridges, and other public works. Most U.S. citizens believe that the United States is a country and that the President is the most powerful man on earth. The United States is not a country. It is a corporation, and the President is President of the Corporation of the United States. He and his elected officials work for the corporation, not for the American people. Since the United States is a corporation, who owns the corporation of the United States? Like Canada and Australia, whose leaders are prime ministers of the Queen, and whose land is called Crown Land, the United States is just another Crown colony. Crown colonies are controlled by the empire of 3 city-states. At the center of each city-state is a towering, phallic-shaped stone monument called an obelisk that points skyward. In D.C. city-state, the obelisk, known as the Washington Monument, was dedicated to Freemason George Washington by the Freemason Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia. The secretive Brotherhood of Freemasons laid the Washington obelisk's cornerstone in 1848 and contributed 22 Masonic memorial stones. 250 Masonic lodges financed the Washington Monument obelisk, including the Knights Templar Masonic Order. At the heart of London city-state is a 187-ton, 69-foot-tall Egyptian obelisk called Cleopatra's Needle. It was transported from Egypt and erected on the banks of the River Thames. In Vatican City, another Egyptian obelisk towers high above St. Peter's Square. What exactly is an obelisk? Obelisks are phallic-shaped monuments honoring the pagan sun god of ancient Egypt called Amun-Ra. The spirit of this pagan god is said to reside within the obelisk. Obelisks symbolize the phallus and fertility. At the base of the obelisk is a sunwheel circle symbolizing the vagina. Together, they depict male and female sexual union. Worshippers of Amun believe Amun is the supreme god and creator of all things, and can transform himself into other gods, like Osiris, the god of the underworld, or Seth, the god of evil and chaos. Since vowels were interchangeable in the biblical Hebrew language, Amun can be spelled A-M-E-N, A-M-O-N, O-M-O-N, or A-M-U-N. Today, Amun is one of the most popularly used words in the entire world. It is used in all languages by Christians, Muslims, Hindus, and Jews at the end of prayer. Without realizing it, people all over the world are praising Amun. The Old Testament of the Bible is the holy book of both Christians and Jews. Amun is repeated over and over again throughout the Bible and is hidden within the word Testament. The word Amun literally means the hidden one. Many are fooled into believing that Amun means so be it or truly, but in Kings 1 verse 36 of the Old Testament, Amun is identified as the Lord God of my Lord. Why in the world would the Vatican, a fortress of Puritan Christian values, erect a monument symbolizing the pagan god Amun and sexual intercourse right in its own front yard?
And that is a very good question that we've tried to answer today, haven't we? And we have. I think if you want to go back and listen to this show, piece it out, take one, send it to your friends, do all that. It's a good compilation of bringing it all together. And this worship of Amun-Ra, the Isis symbolism behind it, who actually created the first obelisk, Greek mythology, don't get mixed up by all the different names. There's a lot of Greek gods, all going to the same power center, at least in our world today, and we tried to piece that out today. The question at the end was interesting. Why in the world would any of these organizations symbolize themselves the way they do? Because they're really telling you who they are if you look close enough. And if you look close enough, you'll get to the real underlying theme behind all of this, and that's world control. That is basically you being their slave. And as President Kennedy said, remember what he said? And I think I have that in one of my other stories. He said that every man, woman, and child is going to be a slave to this hidden organization, and before I leave office, I will let you know who they are. Excuse me. And guess what? He was killed after he made that statement about 10 days later. So, this secret organization, remember this. A lot of people stop at London and Washington, D.C., and the bankers and all of this. Don't stop there. You got to go to Rome. Puts the whole picture together spiritually and secularly. And unless you understand all of that, you're going to miss out on a lot of the action, so to speak, and a lot of what's going on today, especially this ISIS terrorist group who we have now linked, the creators being the three cities that I mentioned, the three empires of power. The empire of the city in D.C., in London, and in the Vatican. Send this show far and wide, because I'll tell you something. Everybody needs to understand this, because without understanding, how can you function in this new world order? It's impossible. Okay, we'll be back tomorrow on the Investigative Journal. Thanks for listening. And again, you can catch my show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. And you can catch all of my replays at ArcticBeacon.com. Have a good night and see you tomorrow.